Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley facing questions on Capitol Hill today over the Afghanistan withdrawal. This comes as around 100 Americans are still stuck in Afghanistan. The U.S. saw a rise in fatal violence last year. The FBI released its 2020 Uniform Crime Report on Monday. It showed the number of homicides increased nearly 30% from 2019. That's one of the largest single-year increases ever recorded in the country's history. And Instagram is pausing efforts to develop a version of its photo-sharing app for children under 13 years old. That's after bipartisan pushback from dozens of attorneys general. Tune in to Deep Dive as we explore these topics and more. Hello and welcome. This is Deep Dive, and I'm Tiffany Meier. Let's begin in the nation's capital. The highest-ranking U.S. military officer, General Mark Milley, facing questions today on the Afghanistan withdrawal. Senator Roger Wicker asking about the impact on future counterterrorism operations.
General Milley, when you advised that our credibility would be damaged, our credibility has been gravely damaged, has it not, General Milley?
I think that our credibility with allies and partners around the world and with adversaries is being intensely reviewed by them to see which way this is going to go. And I think that damage is one word that could be used, yes.
Milley also admitted to telling a Chinese general last year that the United States was not going to attack China. He said, "My task at that time was to de-escalate. My message again was consistent. Stay calm, steady, and de-escalate. We are not going to attack you." Milley says that call and another made on January 8th of this year were coordinated with Esper, his successor Christopher Miller, and other U.S. officials. Esper has not commented on the calls, which Republicans in Congress say should be probed by current Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. But Miller, who briefly led the Pentagon, said previously that he did not authorize the call. And also during the hearing today, Milley advised against setting hard deadlines.
As a matter of professional advice, I would advise any leader, don't put date certains on end dates, make things conditions-based. Two presidents in a row put dates on it. I don't think that's my advice is don't put specific dates. Make things conditions-based. That is how I've been trained over many, many years.
He also touched on the issue of having troops stay past the August 31st deadline.
If we stayed past the 31st, which militarily is feasible, but it would have required an additional commitment of significant amounts of forces, probably 18th Airborne Corps, 15, 20, maybe 25,000 troops. We would have had to re-seize Bagram. We would have had to clear Kabul, the 6,000 Taliban that were already in Kabul. That's what would have happened beginning on the 1st. And that would have resulted in significant casualties on the U.S. side, and it would have placed American citizens that are still there at greater risk.
The leader of U.S. Central Command also says he believes America should have left some troops in Afghanistan. General Kenneth McKenzie testified with other military leaders before the Senate Armed Services Committee today. McKenzie shared his personal assessment of the plan that led to the removal of all U.S. service members from the war-torn nation.
Senator, again, I won't share my personal recommendation to the president, but I will give you my honest opinion, and my honest opinion and view shaped my recommendation. I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, and I also recommended earlier in the fall of 2020 that we maintain 4,500 at that time. Those are my personal views. I also have a view that the withdrawal of those forces would lead inevitably to the collapse of the Afghan military forces and eventually the Afghan government.
Tuesday's testimony marked the first time that the top military officials appeared before Congress since the evacuation from Kabul. The U.S. Defense Secretary, meanwhile, is defending the military pullout in Afghanistan. Lloyd Austin, testifying before a congressional committee on Tuesday, says the Pentagon planned well before evacuating the country, but was taken by surprise.
But we could not forge a nation. The fact that the Afghan army that we and our partners trained simply melted away, in many cases without firing a shot, took us all by surprise, and it would be dishonest to claim otherwise.
Austin says the State Department is still working to get Americans and green card holders who want to leave out of Afghanistan. It is unclear how many people that involves. He says it is no longer a military mission. As to the number of Americans still in Afghanistan, a senior State Department official announced on Monday about 100 American citizens and legal permanent residents who wish to evacuate Afghanistan are still stuck there. According to a State Department statement, quote, "The biggest constraint to the departure of our citizens and others from Afghanistan, of course, remains the Taliban's unpredictability regarding who is permitted to depart." The official also said, "Our highest priority in Afghanistan, of course, remains helping those American citizens who wish to leave the country now to do so, and ensuring safe passage and freedom of movement." At least 85 American citizens and 79 lawful permanent residents have evacuated the country on sporadic flights with U.S. assistance since the last American troops withdrew on August 31st. And speaking of the Afghanistan withdrawal, a Marine who sought accountability from the U.S. has been jailed. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller was fired in late August after posting a video on Facebook criticizing what he called the ineptitude of U.S. military leadership. He posted it the same day 13 U.S. troops and over 100 Afghans died in a terrorist attack outside Kabul's airport. Scheller is now in pretrial confinement awaiting a preliminary hearing. And now, speaking of the Taliban, there's been an escalation there. A brief look at headlines on the topic. Last Tuesday, the Taliban announces a list of deputy ministers, some noting they failed to appoint any women in the government. The next day, the newly appointed envoy to the United Nations seeks fast world recognition of Afghanistan's new rulers. On Thursday, the Taliban tells AP that public executions and other harsh punishments will return. And by Saturday, witnesses see 4 bodies hung up in a public square. An unidentified Taliban member alleged that the bodies were kidnappers. And this was a warning that crime will not be tolerated. Locals tell the AP the public hangings are a sign the Taliban is returning to its harsh past. Now, speaking of crime, let's turn to the United States. The FBI released its 2020 Uniform Crime Report on Monday. It showed the number of homicides increased nearly 30% from 2019. That's the largest single-year increase since the agency began tracking these crimes in the 1960s. Last year, there were more than 21,500 killings. That's nearly 5,000 more than in 2019. That's a total not seen since the mid-1990s. The homicide rate in 2020 was 6.5 per 100,000 people. Murder rose over 35% in cities with populations over 250,000. The report found that no part of the U.S. was spared. Louisiana continued to have the highest murder rate in the country for the 32nd year. The overall violent crime rate was up by 5.2%. This figure includes murders, assault, rape, and robbery. In 2020, there were an estimated over 1 million violent crimes. Jeff Asher, a data consultant who studies crime, told NPR that the increase in 2020 is the largest since national records started being kept in the 1960s. He says in the 90s, New York and Los Angeles accounted for 13.5% of all murders nationally. Last year, it was under 4%. So it's a lot more diffuse than it was in the 90s. He commented on the murder rates in cities with different sizes, saying it was up over 30% in both, so neither was good, but it was worse slightly percentage-wise in smaller cities. It was bad everywhere, adding there's not a good murder takeaway there. And while violent crimes increased by 5%, overall crimes decreased about 6%. The FBI collects statistics from law enforcement agencies across the country, but many do not participate. Several large cities like New York, Chicago, and New Orleans did not submit data. And airport security officers are intercepting more weapons at checkpoints than before the pandemic. According to the Transportation Security Administration, about 7,900 weapons have been found so far this year. Of those, about 4,500 are what the TSA calls live weapons, which includes things like loaded guns. Last year, officers found more than 3,200 guns, and 83% were loaded. TSA regulations permit traveling with guns that are unloaded, packed in hard containers, and checked into the cargo hold. Now, let's take a moment to turn to the digital world. Instagram has paused efforts to develop a version of its photo-sharing app for children under 13 years old. Adam Mosseri, head of Instagram, announced in a blog post on Monday that the Facebook-owned company is pausing the development of its Instagram for 10 to 12-year-olds. Mosseri said the company still believes building the children's version is the right thing to do, but it's pausing the work to consult with parents, experts, and policymakers, as well as demonstrate the value of the project. Instagram has been facing scrutiny after it was revealed the social media platform knew its app could negatively impact teen girls. In July, the company announced it was creating a new Instagram experience for tweens. In the new version, accounts would be managed by parents and guardians to reduce the number of people lying about their age to get on the platform. And earlier this year, a bipartisan coalition of 44 attorneys general urged Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg to abandon plans to create the platform. They noted that studies have shown that using social media can be detrimental to the health and well-being of children. The attorneys general also said children don't have a developed understanding of privacy and pointed to risks of online predators. Meier addressed some of the concerns, saying the children's Instagram will require parental permission to join and will have age-appropriate content and features. Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn is calling the pause a step in the right direction to ensuring a safe environment, but says there's still much work to be done. Blackburn, along with Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, is conducting an investigation into Facebook's knowledge of the negative impact of Instagram on teenage users. A Senate subcommittee is set to hold a hearing on Thursday on how social media impacts the mental health of children. And now, before we end, a wandering walrus named Wally has become quite the celebrity. In his latest European adventure, the walrus went from Ireland to Iceland. Wally has been spotted in Iceland, a whopping 560 miles away. 22 days ago, Wally was spotted in West Cork, Ireland. There has been concern for his safety, but the Irish rescue charity Seal Rescue Ireland said the pics of a similar-looking walrus in Iceland were indeed Wally. Wally has also been spotted in Britain and Europe, leading some to say his name should be changed to Waldo. But what do you think? Let me know below. Thanks for tuning in to Deep Dive. I'm Tiffany Meier, and see you soon.